Yeah, so we were discussing the three divisions or three types of people who do their spiritual practices in three ways, and that is what was discussed in the verse number 4, 5, and 6. In very brief, Bhagavan has explained to us in the verse number 4 of the 70th chapter that people who are kind of spiritually inclined, oriented towards truth and righteousness and sukha, that equanimity and balance, they are the ones who generally indulge in auspicious spiritual practices. And all kinds of religious practices cannot be termed as auspicious according to Bhagavad Gita. I mean, they may be religious, they will give you certain powers, but you can still call them either sattvika or rajasika or tamashika. So they are people who worship different gods. He could be Lord Vishnu or Shiva or Devi or anything. And most likely, he was kind of privileging the ones who would stay very close to the Vedic upasanas, meditations, and also karmakandas. But in Bhagavad Gita, he neither rejects karmakandas because in chapter 4 he has said that whole life is a sacrifice and there are a lot of kriyas and rituals, and you do it without any craving for results. And if we so do, then our inner consciousness kind of gets purified. We benefit from it. That's what he had mentioned there. So he's not rejecting the Vedic rituals, but he's more emphasizing on, purposeful work with a sense of detachment and dedication to the Supreme Lord, number one. Number two, auspicious religious practices. And that's what he's sort of saying, that those who are doing Deva Yajana, the gods and stuff like that. So we could use that as a kind of a metaphor for cleanly or auspicious. How do you describe it? There are certain practices which involve some very hard physical exercises or certain rituals who are kind of which transgress our concept of what is good and what is kind and what is dharma. Now, you could argue that he perhaps is not pluralistic enough. No, he's not saying he's not pluralistic. He's essentially saying that depending on what is the orientation of that person, he would be taking two different kind of modes of sadhana. So that is sattvic sadhana, auspicious, cleanly, and doesn't harm anyone and stuff like that, and doesn't harm oneself. Whereas the rakshasa sadhanas are the ones are very hard. It involves a lot of physical stress when they do it with an egoistic dedication to their own spiritual practices, because that's oriented towards gaining certain siddhis and powers which they can then use to vanquish and defeat others. Like in Vedas, there is a mention of Shena Yaga. The adhikara for Shena Yaga is not with the Brahmin, it's with the tribal chieftains. And they do it to kill their enemies. I mean, that's definitely even though it's there in the Vedas, but definitely it's a Rajasika sadhana. It's not a great thing. Then he says that people who worship spirits and they belong to different kind of dark cults, that is called Tamashika sadhana. So in that sense, he sort of is not somebody who is very fascinated with these different kind of religious cults. And now and we have already discussed that what is asastra vitam ghoram tatyante ye tapojanaha dambho dambha hankar sanyuktaha kamaraga valanvitaha. It's out of craving. They're doing these practices not because they are detached or they want to realize the divinity. If you are doing it because you want to benefit from your connectivity with the divine, with the supreme, with the surrender, that is sattvika. You're doing it because there are different intermediate level powers which are invisible. You are trying to invoke them for some powers. Not very good. And then there are other people who sort of they torture themselves. And then at the end of the day, there are other people who are kind of doing very, very dirty thing, sadhanas, like tantric modes. And he has discussed that at great length. The commentary, Madhusudana Saraswati. Now he's going to tell us that even the food we consume and the way we take it, that also can be categorized as sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika. That's what is in the verse 7 to 10. Ye sattvikaha te deva ye tu rajasaha tamasascha te viparyasyatvad asura iti sthite sattvikanam adanaya rajasa tamasanam hanaya cha ahara jagya tapo dananam traividyam aha. He's saying that whether you're doing any sadhana, any tapasya, any kind of anushthanam, as they say, that you want to do a japa kriya, you want to remain, in a silent state for a while, whatever spiritual practice you want to do, and then what food you consume, what kind of yajna you do, sacrifices, religious sacrifices, and what kind of donations or charitable work you do. All this can also be categorized into three types: rajasic, tamasic, or sattvic. Why he's doing it? Because he has already mentioned that the people who are sattvic, who are on the path of light and righteousness and clean spiritual practices, they go to the gods, not to the intermediate level spiritual powers like the yakshas and rakshasas or low level spirits and other kinds of occult practices. Therefore, he's saying that the ones who want to remain clean and sort of use it for the benefit of purifying their minds, they want to remain sattvikas, right? And therefore, he's elaborating what are the food they should intake, what kind of donations they should do, and what kind of yajnas or sacrifices they should organize, right? At the same time, he's also telling us what are these things that we shouldn't do, what are the foods we shouldn't consume, what are the danas or stuff like that we shouldn't do, what kind of donations are not good for us. So he will tell us at length in these four verses right now. But there'll be 15 verses like this, starting with this, where he'll tell us about three types of people doing three types of donations, consumption of food, religious rituals, okay, all this, and tapasyas. आहारस्वपि सर्वस्य त्रिविधो भवति प्रियः यज्ञस्तपस्तथा दानं तेषां भेदम् imam शृणु. My boy, listen to the three types of people who are doing what? Aharasu api sarvasya. Even the kind of interest they take in different types of food, we could put them in three categories. That becomes the three types. And also yajnaha, tapaha, tatha danam. So the way they do their yajnas, their religious rituals, their sacrifices, and the way they do donations, the way they do their tapas, their strict spiritual codes of conduct they impose on themselves for specific purposes can also be categorized. And there is a difference between how the sattvika person will do it, how the rajasika person, who is worldly wise, is a great achiever, how he will do it, and how a lazy, guy who's looking for failure and all kinds of negativities, how he will behave. Now, he is giving the commentary. I'm not getting into Sankara Bhashya because I checked more or less that's fully taken care by Madhusudana. He adds things, he takes the key ideas from Sankara and elaborates that. So we needn't go there. Now Kevalam Shraddhaiva Trividha. It's not only Shraddha, because that's Shraddha Vibhagi Yoga. Types of spiritual aspirations, inclinations. He's saying not only that Shraddha or Bhakti is of three types, but also Aharopi Sarvasya Priyaha Trividha Eva Bhavati. Even what kind of food we like is of three types because we are of three types. Sarvasya Trigunatmakatvena Chaturthya Vidhayaha Asambhavat. So you don't have a fourth type because all people can be divided because this Prakriti or Maya, out of which we are modifications, we are the Karya. That avidya or Maya is the Karana, Upadana Karana. Bhagavan is the Nimitta Karana. We also say Avinna Nimitta Upadana Karana because this Maya is not independent of the Brahman. And therefore, Bhagavan is both the material cause and the efficient cause. So the material cause, in a way, is attributed to the Maya thing, which is Vikari, Nitya Vikari, and out of which all of us have sort of because fundamentally nothing is real. Maya is also fundamentally not real. It's neither Sat nor Asat. It's Sadasad Vilakshana. That's what the Maya is. Same also the whole Jagat, including all of us. Fundamentally, all of us are, if we go deeper, we'll go to the foundation, which is Brahman. That we keep in mind when we discuss all this. These are Vyavaharika. These are kind of the empirical realities that we are discussing in this chapter, so that we can transform our consciousness, we can meditate on our spirituality and refine our ways of meditating on God and the divine so that we realize the self. So the food is also three times. Yatha drishtartha ahara trividha tatha yajna tapo danani adrishtarthani api trividhani. What is drishtarthani? If you, let's imagine that we take a glass of tea or coffee when it's raining or snowing outside, you feel pretty good. That is drishtafala. You submit your income tax returns on time. So there is no query, there is no problem with you. You abide by the rules, there's no problem. These are drishtafalas. You can verify it yourself. And there are certain karmas we do, we don't know what's going to happen. Like you're doing a certain yajna for Swarga Gamana, you want to go to heaven. So the Veda says you do the Soma Yaga. You do that, but you don't know whether you're going to go to Swarga or not. How do you believe? Oh, well, the Veda says this. That is Adrishta Falaka. It's not seen by our physical eyes. We can't even do any kind of anumana because the one who has done this yaga, has he gone to Swarga or not? There's no way to verify it. So there is no inferencing. There is no premise available. Even for anumana or any kind of induction or deduction, you have a premise. Here you don't know. What do you believe in? The Shastras, the text. So he's saying, Yatha Drishtata Ahara Trividas Tatha. And then this Jagya Tapa Danani Adrishtani. Jagya, Tapa, and Dana. These are the spiritual things that we do to get some punya phala. And the punya phala is not visible. The punya stays with us, but we can't see this. No one can see this. But they can infer by looking at our behavior. We're very happy. People say, oh, must have done a lot of punya in the last birth. And then the punya we do earn through good charitable work, yajna, tapa, and dana. These are adrishta phalaka. They're not drishta phalaka. They're not secular duties. They're not material. The material outcomes of these cannot be verified immediately, and therefore they are adrishta phalani, yajna, tapo, danani, adrishtarthani. The artha, the phala is not visible. Api trividhani, they are also of three types. Tatra, now he's going to describe what is yajna, what is, he's kind of doing a nomenclatural discussion. He's discussing the typology, but he's kind of introducing us the language of the theology. What is yajna, what is homa, what is dana? He's sort of educating us, which is very kind of him. Tatra yagyam vakyasyamo द्रव्य देवता त्यागः इति कल्पकारेः देवता उद्देश्येन द्रव्यतागो यज्ञ इति निरुक्तः. So sacrificing is, when you are actually offering anything, those which are readily available in the Vedas as to what has to be sacrificed for whom. So that particular devata is going to, like for example, there is a devata called Pushan who sort of takes you to heaven, it's said, and he sort of comes and helps you in your sadhana. Is Pusha. Pusha, Pushan is the sabda, the pratipadika is Pusha. Now, apparently, he didn't have teeth. And it said that when he was sitting at the Daksha Yajna and Lord Shiva was very angry, went and he lost his teeth in that hoi polloi that ensued when Lord Shiva arrived. And this guy doesn't have teeth, so when you offer food, they say that you must offer sattu, that powder with some milk. We should not be very grainy because then, oh, I see. Mhm. My connection is unstable. YouTube is saying, okay, we continue. Let's see. So, uh, so what happens is that there is a particular kind of food which is that it should be ground to dust form, a powder form. So you offer, you have that sattu which is offered, like powdered gram, fried gram, which is powdered, and then mix ghee and milk and stuff like that. Because this god doesn't have teeth. How do we know it? We don't know it. It's written that you should offer this kind of powdered food, which is very easy to digest. I mean, he doesn't even have a physical body. What is it all about? Okay, this is a certain ritual. And when we offer this, there are certain mantras that we recite and then we offer it. And that is what is called yajna. Devata uddeshyena dravya tyaga. That is the food that you're offering. It could be ghee, it could be different kind of cereals, it could be sugar, whatever is thrown into the fire, that particular thing. Then we'll see what is Kalpakare, the Kalpasutrakarena, Uddeshena Dravyataga Jagyati Niruktaha. That is what it is defined. Sacha Yayatina, because that Yayati, Swargakama Yayata, that particular word which is there, Juhut Juhoti, Agnihutram Juhoti, these are the statements in the Vedas. Juhotina cha Choditatvena, that means that is what is Vidhitvena Prapta in the text. We can read them, they have been prescribed for us. याग होमश्चैति द्विविधा. सो जुहोति होम करता है, यजते स्वर्ग स्वर्ग काम यजेत करना चाहिए, सोम याग या दस पूर्णमास याग करना चाहिए. होमश्चैति द्विविध उत्तिष्ठ होमा vasatकार prayoganта. So, like for example, in the homas you have these gods and there are certain mantras at the end. What are the things that we have? Swaha Deva Havirdani, Srausad, Vausad, Vasat, Swadha. In Amar Kosh it's mentioned. That these are saying Om Shwaha, Swadha, Vasat. And these are the mantras ending with these sort of sounds, and then these are offered to the gods. Vasatkara Prayoganta. In the end of that mantra, the Vasatkara is that Vasat word. And then there is something called Yajya Puronavakya Yavanto Yatayaha. Now, Yajatayaha. So, this what is, there are two more technical terms there. One is called Yajya. So, when you are doing a yaga, you have to recite or chant a few mantras. And these are called the Yajya mantras. And they are necessary for the yaga. Similarly, there are certain mantras to invoke the divinities. Like, for example, in small house pujas also, for example, you call that god and you say, you come and you sit here and you take our food, and there are different mantras for that. Atra agacha, atra tishta, atra sanni vishtu bhava. All these are mantras we say to invoke and invite them. Then we give them asana, and we offer some water, and then some arghya and panchopachara, shodasopachara, different kind of pujas are there. The simple one is that you give vadya and then arghya in their hands. Then you have this gandha and pushpa, and then deepa, and then naivedyam. Simple thing that you do every day. Now these devatas, this puja is different, but yaga, there is some fire and there are these offerings are made and there are elaborate, very strict code of conduct is prescribed by the Vedas that we have to follow to do. And this yajya and anuvakya, these two sets of tools, one is for recitation and the other one is also kind of chanted to invoke the gods. If you see the presence of the yajya and anuvakya in a particular ritual, it's a fire ritual, it becomes a yaga. If you don't have it, upavishta homaha swahakara prayoganta. So in the mantra, in the end, it is Om Agne Swaha, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Swaha, because you are doing a Gita Yajna. The swahakara, if it's there in the end, the devata of this, that prakshepana, in the fire, you are throwing that food or whatever, milk or ghee or whatever, that is homa, prayogan. So there is one technical term he says is called ussarga. And what is ussarga? Ishta, purta, datta. There are certain purta, charitable work. Vapi, kupa, taragadi. So you are drilling a well in a village which doesn't have easy access to water. Or taraga, you are having a small water body you're creating there. Vapi is also again a bigger well sort of thing, which is there in many places in South India. And so it's a water body, it's a special kind of thing. Now these are things that you give, or for example you can give a night shelter for people who can sleep at night in a pilgrimage or in a village or on a highway. You give a shed for people to take rest, or maybe give them a little toilet or anything. All these things are ussarga. Why? You can also use it, isn't it? So you're creating a benefit for others without losing access to that benefit. So you do plantation of some trees. So you can also benefit because it will bring down the temperature and it will address climate change issues. So you are helping others, you're helping yourself. It's a win-win thing. That's called ussarga. And then you lose your ownership, but nobody else benefits. These are also things certain people do. Like, for example, imagine you're trekking and you are in a very dense forest, like Amazon or in the Himalayas, you're somewhere in the forest, and deliberately, let's imagine you are very attached to a golden ring that you had, but you're saying, I'm going to be a sannyasi. Okay, so you throw that golden ring in a river or a stream. Are you going to get anything? No. Is anybody going to benefit out of it? No. So you have swa sattva tyaga, but it's not causing somebody else is gaining out of it. You're just abandoning it. Okay, that is prakshepa, just throwing away. That is another thing. Okay. Now this is what is dana. This is nomenclatural ideas, and then what is tesam ahara jagya tapodananam sattvika rajasa Tamasa Vedam Maya Vakhyayamanam Imam Shrunu. Now I'm going to explain all that to you. What the Sattvika people do, what the Rajasika people do, and what the Tamasika people do. Please pay attention. Now, first we'll deal with Ahara Jagya Tapodananam Vedaha Panchadasavihi Vakhyayate. Now, in 15 slokas, he will explain this. Now, first for the Sattvika people. आयुः सत्त्वबलारोग्य सुखप्रीतिविवर्धनाः रस्याः स्निग्धा स्थिरा हृद्या आहाराः सात्विकप्रियाः. First he's talking about the ahara. Ahara, jagya, tapa, dana. About these four things, he will divide them into three. So you'll have 4 into 3, right? So you have 12 things, and there'll be 12 verses to explain all that. First, he's talking about the sattvika ahara. Ayuhu chira jivanam. Ayuhu sattva. Ayu means your long life. Sattva, you have this good state of mind. Sattvika bhava. Bala, strength. Arogya, freedom from disease. Sukha, happiness. And priti vivardhana. You have a sense of, what do you call it? Elation or sense of contentment or tripti or, satisfaction. So these are the sattvic aharas. The aharas, the food that gives you long life, which means it's very healthy food, and it purifies your mind, gives you physical strength, keeps you away from disease, gives you happiness and satisfaction, raises your sense of happiness. That is sattvic ahara. Rasyaha, generally this should be not very dry. It's kind of with a bit of, it's not very watery either, but there may be some butter or ghee because they were very fond of ghee, right? So rasyaha, snigdha. There's rasapurna, okay, juicy, it's tasty, yummy, and then snigdha. So it's very easy to eat. Sthira, and so sthira is something which sort of stays with you after you have consumed. It's not for the pleasure of just tasting it, but it contributes to you. It stays in your body. So it has a lot of vitamins and minerals and proteins and stuff like that. Hridya, and it's easy to sort of take it. It doesn't have bad smell and stuff like this. It touches your heart. It doesn't trouble you. So that is Vidya Aharaha Sattvika Priyaha. So these are the Aharas, the Sattvika people, the spiritual ones like it. Ayuhu Chira Jivanam. What is long life? That is Ayu. Sattva Chitta Dharyam. That is what is balance of mind, the patience, that food. Certain food creates irritation in you, right? So doctors say that a lot of sugar intake sort of makes children develop what they call ADHD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. So you want to have food, a lot of vegetables and fibers and fruits and stuff like that. They will give you that chitta dharya, sattvika bhava, and then a balavati dukkhevi nirvikaratva apadakam. So that even though there may be some stress and strain, the kind of food you take is going to enable you to have a great deal of patience. You are not disturbed very easily. What is balam? Sarira samarthyam. Okay? And that is very sochitte karye srama bhava prayojakam. And then what is that, that sattva? That bala, what is bala? Bala is not only physical strength. No, he's not mentioning. It's actually your endurance, your ability to sustain something. And then you have that kind of sense of, what do you call it? A bit of enthusiasm in you. Bala is kind of talking about your enthusiasm. And then, swa uchita karye, what you should be doing, what is morally expected of you, and you want to discharge that, srama bhava prayojakam, and then you are ready to do it without thinking that you are laboring, you are not feeling burdened, you are happily doing it. That sort of energy it gives. So if you don't take sattvic food, like you take all bad food and stuff like that, so let's imagine that you are attending to a sick patient in a hospital. You are a doctor or you're a soldier on the border, so you are there to do your duty, but your body doesn't help you, and the body sort of ditches you in the middle of the journey. And that is what is hinted, that you should be able to discharge what is rightfully expected of you, and the energy, that utsaha, that enthusiasm, that eagerness, you should be able to derive from food. And if you take good food, sattvika food, spiritual food, that gives you that eagerness, that freshness of mind, and that enthusiasm. And what is arugyam? Vadhya bhavaha. So obviously you don't have vyadhis, means diseases. Anamayam. Okay? That is arogyam, anamayatam. Shukham. What is bhojana anantara alhada striptihi. So you know that sukha, that after taking food, you should not eat so much that you feel burdened or heavy. And you should not take food taking which you feel uncomfortable. If any food makes us uncomfortable, that is not sattvic food. So sometimes the same food, it could be sattvic food. Let's imagine you are having a cup of milk or anything. That's good, sattvic. But you take 5 liters of milk, you're going to vomit, isn't it? Or maybe you will have indigestion. So sattvika is not just about what food, it's about how much and at what time. These will all come into the discussion. So you should have a bit of triptya, satisfaction, happiness. Pritir bhojana kale na aviruchi kale anaviruchi rahityam. So when you're taking food, what is that priti vivardhana? It enhances your sense of elation or happiness. It's yummy. Is it about only taste? No. He's saying when you're taking food, food should be such that you don't develop a sense of distaste for it. You know, I mean, it doesn't have any taste, and you're taking it, and you're forcing yourself to take it. No, it shouldn't be like that. And icha outkutyam. So you have a lot of happiness. You want to have more of it because it's so good. It's so healthy. It doesn't harm you. Tesham vivardhana visheshena vriddhi hetavaha. And all these qualities that we discussed, the food that enhances them is called sattvika food. Rasyaha. Then he said rasyaha. What is that? Aswadya. Rasya means what? Rasapurna. It's yummy. It's very tasty. It's like, imagine, it's like fresh fruits, right? And maybe some dairy products, not the heavy ones, but the light ones. Like you have a bit of yogurt and fruit in the morning, and a bit of light cereals. This is very, very healthy food, isn't it? That is very sattvic. Madhur sampradhanaha. And what is snigdha? Sahajena agantukena va snehana yuktaha. So there are certain foods, they carry certain natural oils in them, isn't it? And you sometimes add a bit of purified butter or cheese or whatever, or some oil. So that's sneha. Sneha is that whatever sort of makes it oily in a certain sense. Sneha here means that. So use of some sort of butter or some sort of organic lubricant or whatever you can call it. Yuktaha. Either by nature it has it or you're adding to that food. Sthira. So rasadi angsena sarire chira kala sthayinaha. So you take a lot of food, everything gets flushed out after a few hours, but the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins, they stay in the body and resuscitate us, help us. Hridya, what does that mean? Hridangama, durgandha asuchitvadi drishta adrishta dosha sunyaha. So foul smell, or it doesn't smell very good, it sort of puts you off. No, it shouldn't be like that. Like, for example, a lot of people in Nepal I've seen, they cook these bamboo shoots and bamboo flowers and stuff like that. Certain fresh bamboo plants, they take the shoots out of it, and but they advise you when you buy this, it has to be cooked within 2-3 hours. If you don't cook it, it gives a very foul smell. And then a lot of people take this fish and other seafood, it gives a very bad smell, doesn't it? And there are certain people, and if you go to Bangkok or Thailand, you walk on one of those streets, they have these seaweeds, and it's supposed to be a delicacy, but it could actually put you off. You just don't want to be there. And similarly, I mean, this is nothing to be culturally insensitive, but there are certain foods certain people consume. The very smell of it puts you off. It's nothing to do. I mean, they like it, but it puts you off. And if it's sattvika food, it should not put you off. That's what it is saying. So, what are the key things? First thing, the food should be juicy and tasty, and should be full of nutrients. It contributes in terms of the proteins and minerals and vitamins who stay in your body. It's not for the heck of the taste that you are taking it. And also, there's a bit of input of butter and stuff like that, or some good oils. You require them. Maybe they were. I'm not claiming that they knew about vitamin A, but yeah, I mean, you need a bit of essential oils, and these are good, and you smell it smells good. If you take that, aharasya, okay, then what sort of food? We have discussed that earlier, right? This ahara, whatever you are taking, there is this categorization. One is bhakshya, one is bhojya. Bhakshya is what you chew, charvya, and bhojya is what you drink, or you just can gulp it. It's like custard, or you can say the certain puddings you prepare, and milk pudding or anything, custard, and these are the things which you can just gulp it, is it? And there is something lehya. Lehya is like chocolate, maybe something made out of chocolate, or there are many of the things which, and like juice out of sugarcane or any other fruit juice that you're using your mouth and your tongue, like mango, the juice you suck out of the fruit, all those things. That is chosya, and that is lehya. Okay, so and apeya is anything you drink, like milk or fruit juice or anything. So these are, but this would be all spiritual things. So if I look at it, the only thing that comes to my mind, which is actually very, very spiritual from this description, is that you have some fresh fruits, or maybe a banana, a very light cereals with a bit of milk and stuff like that in the morning, even for lunch if you can have it, because it seems they qualify all the conditions that are mentioned here. That's very sattvika food, and absolutely no spices, and not foul smelling food at all, which will anyway move away from your plate. A lot of things, a lot of seafood and stuff like that. Okay, and saying satvika anang priya eti lingehi satvika genya. So with this linga is what? Linam aprataksham artham. gamayati iti lingam. Lingam is not fallacies. A lot of people want to go that way, especially in Western academia. But he's saying lingam is chinnam. It's like a marker through which you know something. Like Lord Shiva Linga, it's a kind of an indication. It's a symbolic representation of what is shubha, what is auspicious. So satikatvam avilasadvihi cha ete adeya ityartha. Why is it mentioned here? Because that is what we should be aspiring for, because we want to be sattvic people. Now we'll go a little down to look at what kind of food the Rajasika people take. It might appear, if you go to South India, that they take a lot of spicy food, right? Even Indians take a lot of spicy food. And the above description, in fact, a lot of Europeans will pass off as very, very sattvic food, but consumers of and people who relish very sattvic food because they don't like a lot of spice and stuff like that. Now, the Rajasic people. Katwamla lavana tyuksna tikna ruksha vidahinaha ahara rajasya stesta dukha soka mamaya pradaha katva amla lavana atyushna tikshna ruksha vidahinaha. So these are the types of food he's saying that Rajasic people take. Katu is what is bitter. Okay. I hope he's not including the bitter chocolates. A lot of people take these bitter chocolates, but I don't think that will still pass off as tasty because. But there are other things, and now doctors say that neem is actually, as per Ayurveda, is a very good thing to take. Right? It has a lot of antibacterial qualities. Amla, a lot of this, pickles and stuff like that. But lemon again is a medicine, so we have to look at it with a lot of clarity, not blindly, literally take whatever is mentioned here. Katu, amla, and lavana shouldn't be too much of. So maybe a lot of tamarind and a lot of the sambar and all people say maybe that is what is indicated here. Then lavana, a lot of salty food, use of too much of salt in food. Atyushna, very hot food. I mean, that's very peculiar to South Asia. And tikshna, very sharp, which sort of burns your tongue or, you know. Druksha, very hard. It's like those cereals. They mention here things like, millet and ragi and stuff like that, which are very healthy food these days, but that's what they say, the Rajasic food. Maybe that's what is required, isn't it? You need a lot of muscles to fight wars. And if you're a Kshatriya, and I mean, in good old days, if you're a bodybuilder or you are into a lot of gymming, or you're somebody who loves a lot of physical activities, you're doing trekking or you're doing very rigorous physical work, you're a sports person, I think you need a little of Rajasic food because Sattvic food will not help you there. Because your vritti, your profession is very Rajasic. So that you have to understand. There has to be some sort of a alignment between the food and the kind of profession we have. Okay. So, and then what is Tikshna and Vidahinaha? That sort of burns, it gives us some pain when we take it. Ahara Rajasya Ishta, and these are the people, Rajasic people, they love this sort of food. And you know what? Dukkha Soka Maya Prada. Amaya is disease, imbalance in the system. Dukkha is what you immediately feel bad about. Shoka, which you feel bad later on. So you taste some pickles, it's very hot, and then you love it because maybe it's very tasty. And then what happens to you? After 1 hour, you feel very bad sensation in your stomach because it's weeping because of the acidity that you have given your own stomach, isn't it? So it's like that. Ati sabdaha katvadishu saptasu api yojaniyaha, that ati, that you can add ati to all of it, because we are essentially talking about people who take some food with extreme tastes. Yojaniyaha. Katuhu tiktaha, so that is what is bitter. Katu rasasya tikshna savdena uktatvat. So that katu is tikshna, that is mentioned again. Tatra atir katur nimbadi. So like, these neem leaves or neem flowers are sweet. Interesting. The fruits are, the plums, the neem plums are actually not bitter. That's very strange. The leaves are very bitter, but the plums are not. So ati katur nimbadi, katuhu nimbadi, and then ati amla is what? Ati lavana, ati ushna prasiddha. And also these are rajasika. He's not mentioning what kind of food. He just mentioned that these are the food a lot of people take, because most likely he's referring to us Indians. And ati tikshno marichadi. Maricha is, what is mirch, what you call in Hindi, the green chilies. So ati tikshna. A lot of people take a lot of chilies, isn't it? I mean, the chili eating people are in Northeast, mostly in Nagaland. The Nagaland chilies you can't touch. They're like atom bombs. And then in South America and maybe parts of Africa and mostly in South Asia. Atirukshaha, Sneha Sunyaha, Kangu Kodravadi. And then Atiruksha is those dry cereals, that was talking about different kind of specific millets like jowar and stuff like that, and ragi and stuff like that, but they're very healthy food, by the way. Atividahi Santapako Rajikadihi. And he's saying a lot of people, by the way, this guy is from Bengal, isn't he? So he's mentioning about the recipes which are cooked with a lot of mustard is also Rajasika. That is what he's mentioning. Because anyway, use of mustard is very popular in Eastern India. Dukham tatkalikim pidam. So whatever you feel immediately, that is what is dukkha. But then, you carry what you call anguish or angst, which sort of follows a certain event. You may not, it's quite possible that you don't feel a lot of dukkha, but you feel a lot of sukha later on. So when a person dies, we don't feel any dukkha because we are not physically hurt, but we feel sukha because that's a very subjective suffering. Dukkha is largely physical, it happens immediately, like in case of disease or in kind of defeat or loss or whatever, you suffer. But later on, it persists with you for a while. That is shoka or santapa. It continues with you. Shokam paschadabhavi dourmanashyam. That you have that, that mental pain which sort of continues to hold on to you after a certain event. Amayam rogam. So whatever is roga, whatever is disease or sickness or illness or whatever you call it, why so? Dhatu Vaishamya dwara. So they say it is vata, pita, kapha. As per the Ayurveda, this should be in a good balance. And when there is a disturbance between these three, we develop different kind of not disabilities, but different kind of ailments in the system. So pradadati iti tathavida ahara rajasasya ishtaha. Eti lingehi rajasa gyeha. So by these markers, these indicative words, you know what is rajasika ahara or food. Sattvikaischa ete upakshenya ityartha. So if you want to be a sattvika person, avoid this food. But as I mentioned, what if you have chosen to be a sports person, or you are doing gymming, or you are a boxer, or you are a weightlifter? If you take sattvika food, you cannot do weightlifting. So you have to take some rajasika food, like these millets and raki and maybe other kinds of things, including a lot of animal protein. Then he's talking about the tamasic food, the food which a lot of indolent, lazy people who are, negatively oriented all the time. Yatayamam gatarasam putim paryusitam chadeta uchistam apicha medhyam bhojanam tamasa priyam. What a kind of food the tamasic person loves. Tamasa priyam bhojanam. First, let's yatayamam. So what is yatayamam? It's some food is cooked and then it's kept for some time. A kind of stale food. In brief, if I mention gatarasam, it has lost its taste. It has dried or something. Okay. And puthi, it's maybe having bad smell. Porushitam cha yata. So cha word, Madhusudana Saraswati will explain, it also is about food that sort of intoxicates you. They cook a lot of intoxicants, no? In certain parts of India, out of rice, which is kind of allowed to ferment, and then they cook it with certain other chemicals, and that becomes a country liquor. Uchistamapi. And this is again a funny tradition in certain parts where after marriage the husband takes food and then the wife eats in the same plate. But if you go by our spiritual tradition, that is actually tamasic. That's not spiritual. Both husband and wife, both are equal partners, and they are equal in the eyes of the divine. I mean, that's my view. And that's what is the view in Ramakrishna Mission everywhere you talk to anyone. So the wife actually, where the husband should not take the leftover food of wife, and the wife should not take leftover food of husband. However, they may be loving each other, because and that is actually disrespect for your own, spiritual being, which is within. That's what it says. It's tamashika. And so amedhyam is what is supposed to be prohibited. It could be meat and fish and stuff like that, any other thing. And especially, like for example, the Veda says a Brahmin is not supposed to take alcohol. But interestingly, it's not prohibited for the kings, for the fighters, the rulers, or the Vaishyas. But he's saying that even a Brahmin has to die, he shouldn't take alcohol. I mean, that's not what is followed these days, but that's what is. So this is amadhya, depending on who you are. On the other hand, the Manusmriti, and even in certain parts in Manusmriti is mentioned that avakya vakhyana is permitted for people who do a lot of physical work. And therefore, I mean, a lot of people are shouting about this meat, that meat, but Manusmriti says that avakya vakhyana adhikara is there for people who are doing a lot of physical work, So if somebody eats, that's okay. So, but this is tamasic food he mentions. Yatayamam, ardhapakam. So whatever ardhapakam means, what is not properly cooked. Nirvyasya gatarasapadena uktatvad iti bhashyam. Sankara Bhashya says is that gatarasam is what? It's like nirvirya. It has lost its energy. It has lost its essence in a certain way. So Virasatam praptam suskam. So it has lost its juices. So it's like dry fruit. I mean, the fruits which have become a little dry, or some food you have cooked and you have let it for a few hours, and then you are taking it. These are the gatarasha. Yata yamam pakvam tat praharadi vyavahita vyavahitam odanadi saityam praptam. Let's imagine you cook rice, odana. You cook rice, and then you're supposed to take it when it's warm, put some ghee or whatever, with some rice or some vegetables or lentils, you take it. But you leave it for a while, and then it's winter or something, and then you come back after, in the middle of the night, you go to the kitchen and retrieve wherever the food is kept, and you are eating it. First of all, it's not very tasty, but it's actually tamasika. You shouldn't have it. That's what I'm saying. A lot of people, of course, I mean, this is highbrow spiritual advice, but in rural India, in rural areas, and especially very hot corners of India and Bengal, Orissa, Assam, they take rice with curd or yogurt or buttermilk, isn't it? Next morning, with a bit of salt or other kind of a little vegetable, maybe pickles. The poor farmers, poor people struggling for life. So that's what they think, that this kind of food doesn't give you spiritual aspirations. They dip your spirituality. That's what he's mentioning. Okay, you should not misunderstand that as socially insensitive. They're essentially saying, keeping in view what are the requirements of the system, keeping in view your spiritual aspirations. We agree that there are a lot of people who don't have enough resources, and they may be consuming the food which is described here as tamasic. And we shouldn't be jumping to a social critique of Bhagavad Gita. Look, this Bhagavad Gita glorifies fruits and milk and yogurt and stuff like that. A lot of people cannot, afford. Yeah, that's one way to go. But we are saying that if you can afford it, there are people who can afford all that, but they go for this kind of food. I mean, this is written for them who can afford all kinds of food, and they go for one particular types. Then you can actually draw a conclusion whether he's spiritually inclined, or he's dynamically inclined, he wants to do a lot of physical activities, or he's an achiever, or he's somebody who's indolent and who is kind of negatively oriented. So that is how we make sense, and not necessarily look at everything and say that, okay, we can use this as kind of social history or sociology of faith and start critiquing the commentary of Madhusudana Saraswati, which one can do if he's a student of sociology. But we are talking about spiritual aspirations, and there's a particular context in which we're discussing this. Chena tatkala unmadakaram dhaturadi samuchiyate. So he's saying that paryusitam cha yat. Okay, and paryusitam kim? That is saying that sad ratri ratyantaritam. So you're eating it next day, it's already stale and stuff like that. And there is cha is dhaturadi. There is dhatura, that plant, supposed to be the seeds of that, sort of give you a kick, and they can drive a person mad. And then you have all sorts of things like you have bhang and this marijuana or cannabis and stuff like that. Yad ati prasiddham dushtatvena uchishtam bhuktavasishtam. So whatever somebody has eaten and he has left over, shouldn't eat that. Amedhyam, harm. Whatever food is not worthy of sacrifice, but remember, food is also a yajna. So there are these, what do you call it, choru mantras. When you're taking food, you're supposed to chant some mantras, and then you have this, when you're saying prana is svapana is svavyana is sodana is we say that, isn't it? We're doing, then we are eating, before you say amrita pusrama shishwaha, and in the end you say amrutopi dhanamasi swaha, then you stop eating food. So there are these rules. Okay. Now, so you should not take whatever doesn't deserve to be offered. Also, Jim mangsadi, he just mentioned like meat and other things. Apicha iti vaidyaka sastroktam apatyam samuchiyate. Here there's another cha. He's saying cha amedhyam. So sometimes our bodies have a few ailments, isn't it? And there's some problems. And then the doctors kind of advise us that this food you should not take. You are diabetic, avoid any sugary food, or you have blood pressure, and they will say these kinds of fruits and vegetables you shouldn't consume. So if there's a person which, I mean, in him you see a tendency to consume things contrary to the advice of the doctor, that is also tamasic. So that's one good thing. You're saying that you shouldn't take what is going to produce certain contrary results, certain negative results in our physical system. In the light of what kind of diseases we have, so that one has to be careful. Like you have some cholesterol problem, Atisinigidha, no, you can't take too much of butter and cheese, stuff like that. So one has to be very careful. And there's some additional commentary. We'll have a look at it tomorrow before we go to the three types of yajnas that will start with the verse number 11. So I'll stop here, and any questions you can ask on YouTube. Sorry, on the Google Meet. I'm putting an end to the YouTube. Thanks for hearing.